All right. So, um, in this class, I'm going to show how to polish the LookDev that we set up in our previous classes. Here we can see um, a final clip that sort of represents what we're going for. And for the past few classes, we've been building up uh, to essentially recreating that clip. So in the previous class, we started to block in the look depth for the character. In this class, we're going to get specific with it. So if we jump in um, what we left off in our previous class, um, we have some very simple shaders. They overall try to define what it is that the asset is made of, but they're not specific. So in this class, we're going to learn how to set up eyes. We're going to learn how to start painting the base color and the roughness and go from something that looks a little bit like a clown to something that over time gets more and more believable. So we're going to focus on base color. We're going to focus on roughness and radius. You can see that if you zoom in on this character, we have a lot of detail in these maps. Uh, so we might not be able to appreciate them in the final clip once the character is about this big. Um, but we're gonna show how to uh, paint them a high resolution, high quality, regardless. So let's take a look at the class. So this is part 3. Um, in the previous class, we left off with this very simple block-in for the LookDev. So at the beginning of the class, we take a look at the rig, um, and we realized, well, this is going to take too long to render if we always iterate with the background. So we hide the background and we hide the lights that we've been using so far. And we learn how to set up a very simple rig with a key, a wrap, a top light, a kick, and a ring. Something I always suggest people do is to set up IBLs for the lights. So if you have a hard light, you're gonna have a hot spec, like a hot spot in it. And if you have a wrap or a top light, something softer, you don't need to see a precise highlight um, in your reflections. And then once the simple look type rig is in place, um, we learn how to set up the eyeballs. The models that come with the rig are set up in such a way that you have an outer layer that catches the specular highlights and an inner layer that is meant to simulate the way that the pupil and the iris are kind of pushed back. So, and in between those two, we have an eye white layer. This geometry, we're going to fade it off so that it reveals the iris in the pupil. Um, And in this reference, we can see some of the behavior that might not be super obvious when working with eyes, which is that at a certain angle, you can actually see that the iris and the pupil are recessed, pushed back. And so the iris can go completely shadowed. And you can see this hint of light uh, going through the eye white. That's subsurface coloring. So it's not super obvious. It really becomes noticeable at certain angles, but it is there. And so we're gonna learn how to set up this eye shader. So here is the outer geo. Here is the eye white geo that we're gonna fade off, and here is the inner geo that is gonna have our iris and pupil shader. So over the course of the class, we learn how to um, set up this refractive shader. Then we're going to learn how to set up this opacity map for the eye whites, and then how to set up a procedural method to build on top of the existing textures that we have. So you can see in this case, I'm using a ramp, which is a procedural texture, and multiplying it on top of our base color that we originally set up for the skin. And then we do the similar thing, fake the caustics on it. You can see how now we have this area at the bottom getting a little brighter. And then we can push it even further, uh, again by multiplying our ramp. Um, it allows us to introduce some breakup in the iris. Don't have a good image here, but you can see this sort of breakup that we see in the iris there. That's all coming from these procedural textures that we see over here. Um, all right, so once we are done with the eyes, we move on to the skin. And this is the first time we're covering buildings, but this character is set up with three buildings. One for the face, one for the body, one for the arms, legs, hands, and feet. So by having three separate buildings, we're able to give each of those parts of the geometry a whole 4K of resolution. Whereas traditionally we would be working only within the first 0 to 1 UV square. So we don't have to set up a snapshot that we can export into Photoshop. So we can bring the snapshot into Photoshop and know where we're painting so that we know precisely where we want our strokes to go. Because we're getting specific with these textures. We're no longer, we're using the original tileable textures as our base, but we're working on top of that to bring specificity in terms of what parts of the skin are warmer, cooler, shinier, more rough. Um, we're doing the naming convention that we need for Maya to load them. And then we go from this very humble beginning. Over time, we learn how to polish them. We learn some of the logic that we use to polish it. We jump between different buildings. We start working on the roughness. Um, and after a lot of iterations, we get to a place where we achieve a lot of what we intended, where we have uh, specular highlights on the cheeks, on the chin, on the lips, on the nose. We have strong specular highlights in the eyes. We have shape on the pupil. We have a lot of roughness variation on the hands, on the chest. Um, and then we start polishing the radius. You can see if I look at the kick light here and I boost it, the light is going through her arm. So that's because the subsurface scattering scale is set to a very generous number. But we like that. We just need to reduce the scale in some areas. So that's what the radius map is for. So we're gonna grab the tileable one that we set up in the previous class and get specific. So you can see in this area around the bridge of the nose, where one would expect the skull, or the nose bones to block the light. We paint that area darker. And we do the same thing for the area, which is around her forearm. Difficult to tell, but that's the area where in the UVs her arm is. And once we do that, you can see now the radius is being scaled down. So the light doesn't travel through the arm anymore. Um, those are the textures that I end up at the end of the class. So you can see lots of local color variation. And this is the roughness. You can see lots of variation in the roughness, which is what allows us to achieve shiny cheeks, shiny nose, shiny lips. Uh, and we are using the starting point from the previous class where we have really interesting brushstrokes as our base, so that as the character moves around, we're gonna see really interesting specular highlights travel across her surface. Um, and this is where we end this class. In the next class, we're gonna learn how to um, improve on the UVs uh, of the model, fix UVs, fix bad models, so that we can push the look dev regardless of the limitations of the models that we might pick up, which happens more than we'd like. And in the next class, we're going to learn how to set up the hair and brochure, which both have less than ideal UVs. Um, and then we're gonna reapply the same principles we learned in this class, pretty much. So this class is going to be really foundational for anybody who's trying to improve their lighting by improving the look depth on the character. Because I mean, if you go back to the previous, you know, to what we had at the beginning of the class, you can see how much of a difference proper look depth makes when you're lighting a character. All right. Well, this is a brief overview of the class. I hope you enjoy it. I'll catch you later.